Max, welcome to the Leanpub launch video for the other half of coding, what they didn't teach you. I was wondering if you could take a moment to talk to all of us a little bit about yourself and what you do and what your book is about and who it's for.
Sure. You want me just to go straight into all of that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm a second generation software developer. I guess some people would call me largely self-taught. I've been doing this professionally for almost 30 years and unprofessionally before that for like a decade and something like that. What's the book about? That's the next
Yeah.
best thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the book is about um the fact that the industry is really focused on one part of software development, and that there's a whole other part to it that gets some attention, but it doesn't get the same kind of attention, right? So everything we see, not everything, but 98%, 94% of the material we see is about the state of your code, like what it's like, what your code is like. And it's a small fraction of software that is about the actual act of changing your code, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Occasionally, we have like loops, process loops, like test-driven development, that imply that there's change in there. And actually, if you go back to the test-driven development book by Kent Beck, there's a reference to refactoring, like a real reference to refactoring, not the hand lady refactoring we hear people mean when they say red green refactor now. But he actually like goes through the refactoring steps. But most of the time, what we see is this is the right state, this is the wrong state, these are the good qualities, these are the bad qualities. And all of that is true, but it ignores the journey from point A to point B. Or like in design pattern, right? The original Gang of Four book, it doesn't ignore it, it just explicitly sets it out of scope. Right? It says this is about the shape of code in a current state, and then you can go look at other things for figuring out how to get from one shape to another. And so I thought what we need um, is a book that's about that, like about that specifically. So refactoring is a technique within that, but it's not just about the fact that we're we're focused on just like the left hand half. We're not looking at the right hand half.
Yeah, yeah, no, thanks for explaining that. That's very good. I mean, it's interesting. I don't know if have you heard of there's a Leanpub author named Barry O'Reilly.
No, I hadn't heard of him.
He's got a couple of books that are kind of like, I think, like kind of gesturing in the same direction. He also uses the word ontology, which is a word one doesn't always see in programming books. And I was very glad to see in yours. But the idea that change, basically, that would the way thinking about change as a kind of like foundational concept in software engineering, is sort of a thing that the idea he's exploring, and I've seen it from other very smart kind of Leanpub authors. There's people who are kind of like bumping up against the same kind of thing. And it seems to me, and it's very curious that uh, I don't know. It seems like there's something psychological about a need for finality that people have. They need things to be done, and like
Right.
until it's done, it's not. We haven't solved it. The solution is kind of like the end of thinking about something or having to deal with something. And it seems like that's sort of there in the way people often think about programming. And there's a story I often bring up that I hope isn't, I'm not misremembering, but I interviewed a guy named Jerry Weinberg a few years ago before he died. And his first job was being a computer. That was his vintage. And he had a recollection of being at like an early days IBM meeting when there were a bunch of executives in the room who were very disappointed to hear that programming wasn't something you just hired once for a machine and it was done, that they were going to have to actually have programmers. And because they thought it was something you could just kind of do once and be done with. And
Mhm.
it's very interesting that this kind of way of there's a deep desire for people, particularly maybe in management or business ownership, to have programming be something that can just be finished. But of course, the job of the working programmer is not like that at all.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at that, I think it's actually kind of understandable because I don't want to say we're special, but we're not the common case. Like there are a lot of things that where basically you're talking about a project mindset, which is
Mhm,
kind of more on like the ready side. But
mhm,
you're talking about they're driven by a project mindset, and there are a lot of things where projects apply, like building a house.
mhm,
Right? A house, there's, something there before, and then you get the site cleared and leveled, and then you, like, pour the foundation or whatever, and here you pour the pad because the entire landscape is foundation, and then you build the house, and then you're done, right? Now, it's not to say that the house doesn't require maintenance, but it is a thing that is done. Even building like, even manufacturing is like a bunch of little mini projects, and
mhm,
upgrading a manufacturing line is like project. So you have all these managers that come from this space where this is how they manage things, right? And then, there's this whole idea that you can, like, be a manager of a department full of expert, kind of skilled workers, like programmers, without necessarily being a programmer yourself. So what do they do? What do they reach for, right? They reach for what the '80s era MBAs told them, which has to do with managing by spreadsheets, and they reach for what the PMO tells them, which has to do with, or at least had to do with, project management. And then our industry has been pushing back on this continuously for a long time. I don't want to say our industry hasn't recognized the need for change, because it has. I mean, the Agile Manifesto was a big pushback against those kinds of ideas. And I mean, really, I would say test-driven development is kind of a pushback against that, because it really, put the lie to the idea of building a framework up front, right? You would build it incrementally instead, and you end up with a better result than if you build it up front. So, there's this big design up front thing, big project up front, big everything up front. That is a problem that the industry has been working on. What I'm talking about, and maybe O'Reilly is talking about it, I don't know, 'cause I haven't heard of him, so I haven't read his stuff, but, is more about the flow as a developer. Like, not, not just in an organization making the shift from product to project, and not even in the execution of a single work item, but your day-to-day, your minute-to-minute, uh, application of change. I think that that bears scrutiny, and that, an approach of a continuous transformative flow where you're never really rewriting anything. You stop thinking of yourself as someone who writes software, and you start thinking of yourself as someone who molds software, right? As someone who slowly keeps deforming its shape into new shapes, as close to continuously as is possible with something as discrete as software. That is really the thrust of this book, right? Is to
I really
really.
love that image of molding, and it's very interesting too because you've got this great kind of sequence in the book where you talk about your stages of
Mhm,
development, through basically kind of a, maturity, from being a kind of, child and, relating to code as something that you play with. Uh,
right.
and I loved your representation of like the time, yeah, I think it was you were in college, or like that sort of mental time when you're like, there's formulas and math and solutions.
Mhm.
And then going to work and realizing, oh, there's actually like working with code and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
and then and it's great because you sort of don't, when you know that when you go through that path, there's a sort of like natural transition. You understand there's going to be a transition after this one and a transition after that one to something else. And then you end up in that final state. And I just love that progression and that way of personalizing something that's very professional. But another thing you talk about, and this is maybe slightly tangential, but you talk about it very well, is about like what it's like to actually be someone who's in like the top 1% of
Mm.
programmers, and not like what does their output like look like? You talk a little bit about that, but like what is it like to actually be that kind of person? Um, and I was wondering if you could just take a moment to talk a little bit about that, with us, right? But right now, like
Yeah.
what is it like to be a top 1% programmer?
Well, so, um, feels a little self-congratulatory to talk about myself. I could talk about my friend that I use as an example in the book, but in both cases, you're not really like afraid of code. And I don't know if this makes sense to you, but I, in my consulting time, which has been a large portion of my career, either um, like kind of an embedded mentor who's a player coach or directly like really coaching people. I have met so many developers who either fear or dread or or both the code they're going to work with. And I don't know if you've run into people who feel that way. Um,
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I mean, maybe not. Yes, yes, I have.
yeah, and it's not always like like you think of those emotions as portrayed in the movies, or it's not like they're like a cartoon rabbit like biting their nails or whatever with little pieces falling down. But you see it in all kinds of things. You see it in paralysis, right? You see someone who says, "Okay, I need to make this change. I'm looking at this code. What the hell am I gonna do next?" I don't know if you do you want me to say that again
No, no, go ahead.
without cursing?
No, no, that's fine.
What am I gonna do next, right?
Mhm.
Um, they end up as um they end up in paralysis. They maybe end up flailing. They end up making a bunch of changes. But a lot of it is about trying to avoid risk, right? So they'll like be afraid specifically, especially to change design and most afraid or most worried, concerned, maybe the afraid isn't the right word, but you get my point. Um, they are most resistant to the idea of changing those like central design structures that are the like the brainstem of the application, and they're afraid of breaking everything, right? I had an experience where I was brought in. I think I write about this in the book actually. Yeah, I did. Where I was brought in, and they like wanted the things that I taught as an embedded mentor kind of person, and I was immediately assigned a task that a lot of the people in my local office thought was kind of meant to embarrass me. I was supposed to change this part of the code that no one had ever changed without causing a disaster, like
Mhm,
at all,
mhm,
right? Um, and the last person who changed it, the person who actually added that part of the code to the system, and who then assigned me to make the change to it. When he added to the system, he took the whole team offline for 6 weeks. Like, they couldn't do anything. Now, if I'd been there, I could have fixed it in 4 minutes, right? Because I would have gone in, taken his check in, and gone,
mhm, mhm,
"Revert.
mhm,
You could try again later, buddy." That would have been my response. "We're gonna keep working for the next 6 weeks. Good try. Go again." But I wasn't there, right? Someone
mhm,
else was there, and there wasn't any of that kind of pushback to cowboy, coding.
right,
So he just broke everybody, right? And,
right,
like, I think there were days where the system didn't even compile, right? And so everyone was afraid of touching this thing. I went in, I was supposed to make some change, and the change didn't have the effect they wanted because the people who did the planning didn't really understand what the outcome would be. But what everyone was blown away by was that I had surgically inserted into this thing a strategy pattern that ensured that we could work the old way and the new way, and that we could switch seamlessly between the 2, and I did all of that without anyone even practically noticing. Like, the only way they knew was by going and looking at my changes to see I did it. Didn't affect anyone. They were all just blown away by the fact that it didn't break anything, right? So I am able to work on the most just terrifying to other people code completely fearlessly. Um, but I don't think that that is necessarily the defining trait about what I think of as a top 1% developer, which maybe is what you were asking. Because I think the defining trait is not that you're able to necessarily work on it kind of with the discipline and safety of a brain surgeon, going back to the brainstem analogy, but that you're willing to work on it. I think that is the thing that really like makes it work. And my friend, whom I mentioned in the book, is a great example of this. He went in, he saw this like thing that was causing massive amounts of bleeding, right? It was causing, I don't remember, a bunch of bugs every month just sitting there. And what was really happening, of course, was that it was rife with bugs in the first place. They were just being found every couple months. He just said, I'm not I'm not even gonna try to fix this. I'm just gonna rewrite it, right? And he replaced this whole massive, awful, gnarly system that nobody could touch without causing a bunch of disasters, and that caused a bunch of disasters even when people didn't touch it. Replaced it all with like 3 or 400 lines of code and I think one bug came out of that, right? So he was just like, his solution was, I'm not gonna worry about taking taking this approach and keeping everything the way it is. I'm just gonna take the risk and take my lumps. And he took the risk and he took his lump, his one lump, and it paid off. I think that's what makes someone really a top 1%. I think if you go back and think about the people who are really strongly respected within their organizations, within the industry, you will find that's the one common thread. They just are all willing to make the hard, scary changes, or they aren't scared about the changes in the first place.
Yeah, no, I really love that description in the book and the description that you gave just now, that willingness to just kind of, it is hard to put into words, but the kind of willingness to just, or affinity for just going for it,
Mhm.
and engaging with whatever the problem it is, however difficult it is, however risky it might be. And, if you've ever been in the position of like managing a team, you know who it is that you can, if something new comes up that you don't even understand, but that's very hard potentially, or maybe 4 minutes of work, who knows? But like something new, not understood, probably very important. You know who you can ask to just go take on whatever that is. There's going to be a certain personality type and kind of proclivity and things like that. And yeah, that's what really resonated with me when I was reading your book. It's like trying to address that and articulate that and talk about how like you're not going to find one specific thing. You've got this great section where I'm just gonna quote you back at yourself, but people in the top 1% are often very smart, but they're not all geniuses. Some kind of authority within their organizations, but not always. Adhere to best practices, but basically sometimes just cowboys. Study deeply, but not always, and stuff like that. And it's like there's this variety of traits, but underneath it all is and here's what you say is like, well, I mean, they are willing to tackle the hard stuff.
Yep.
Um, and yeah, I really there's nothing they're unwilling to tackle. And I think that really resonates. It really resonated with me, and like not so much in programming, but in my old investment banking days and stuff like that, right? Like someone might tap you on the shoulder and do you have 5 minutes, and that might mean 6 months in another country,
Right.
say goodbye to your family. But you say, there's people who say yes, and there's people who go, um,
Right.
and there's a big difference between those 2. And it doesn't mean, by the way, I'm not talking about like signing away your life or, giving in or just following orders or something like that. That's not what we're talking about at all. It's kind of self-aware, uh,
Yeah. And I
desire
think
to
narrowing it
problems.
into just developers, I think it's, are you ruled by fear,
Right.
or are you the kind of like the source of dominion, right?
Right.
Does the code dominate you or do you dominate it? Because one of you has to be dominant in that relationship. That's how all relationships are in real life. I know people like to pretend it's not, but that's just
Mhm.
the way things are,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, and it's, I guess, yeah, without, talking forever about the book, 'cause people should go buy it. It is being published in progress, so it's not finished as we speak.
Right.
And I'm just curious about what your plan is for, the next, stage in the writing and publishing.
Yeah. So just to set the trajectory, I'll show where it's been. Right. So right now, 3 parts are finished.
Okay.
Um, uh, part one is about what the problem is. Is trying to get people to understand what I think the problem is, establishing the things that we've talked about, that sort of thing. Part two is about what is in our way, right? Why this problem that is obvious to some is not yet solved, basically. Part three is the I don't want to say outline because it's deeper than an outline. It is the shape of the solution. It is a description of the solution. It is the ontology. It is the principles that produce the solution and a demonstration of how those things culminate in a flow. So that's where we bet. And what I'm working on now, I've got 2 chapters done already, is part 4. And part 4 is the practical part. So in part 4, um, we take all of that stuff and we say, okay, what I mean, I give examples all the way through, right? But now we say, okay, here is a specific technique that you can do, that you can incorporate into your flow in order to support it, in order to be more like this 1% developer, in order to pay attention to the other half of coding. And so that's what part 4 is going to be. It's not a like a coherent narrative building up to a big point like the other parts are. It's like, here's a tool, here's a tool, here's a tool, here's a tool. Some of those tools are not like others, right? So some of those tools are just like things I've learned. Here's a tool or a technique that I have discovered helps me. Or uh, here is like an essential version of something else. I've taken refactoring and I've distilled some essential approaches out of it, right? So here's an essential thing, the disaggregation of change or using duplication or whatever. Others are kind of pointers to existing bodies of work. So I'm going to get people started. If they're not already into test-driven development, I'm going to get them started on it. If they don't already have a deep understanding of refactoring, I'm going to point them to where they can go and do further study. Because you can't, like, those things couldn't even be fully covered in one book. You certainly can't fully cover them in like a few chapters or one chapter of a book, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the point there. And then I'm going to, so that once that part's done, then it'll be the final part, part 5. And in part 5, the goal is to take all of that and give people a realistic plan for actually adopting, right? So it's what's the problem, what's in the way of solving the problem, what the solution is to that problem, the implementation details of the solution, and then the implementation details of making the personal transition from being someone who's focused on the state of code to someone who is going from one step to the next and focused on the transition.
Well, fantastic. That sounds like a really great plan for the rest of the book. One of the great things about Leanpub and the lean publishing process is books actually can have kind of multiple launches as more content is added. So when the book is done, please reach out to me again, and we'll do another one of these videos to cover what you've added towards the end. The book is The Other Half of Coding: What They Didn't Teach You. It's a really great book if you're a programmer, or if you're a sort of team leader with programmers. I definitely recommend reading this. It's kind of bracing. And sort of entertaining. One thing that may not have come across in the interview so far is Max has a great sense of humor, which you'll learn when you read the book. You'll see, for example, I remember the line you talked about your friend who had the sort of like, you might think, did he introduce any bugs? And you're like, he sure did. One. And I love that little line. So yeah, the book is The Other Half of Coding: What They Didn't Teach You. Max, thanks very much for taking some time out of your day to do this great launch video with us, and good luck with the rest of the book.
You're not going to ask me the question you always ask?
What's the question I always ask?
Is it because I prepared for it this time,
Oh,
one thing I want to change?
okay, sure, yeah. So normally we do that on the podcast, but so for anyone, no, that's not.
Sorry, never
We'll do it
mind.
right now. We'll do it right now. No, that's great. So for anyone watching these launch videos who hasn't seen one of our podcast videos or made it to the end, one thing I always ask at the end is, if there's one thing we could fix for you on Leanpub, or one thing magical feature we could build for you, what would you ask us to do? So Max, if there was one thing we could fix for you or one thing we could build with you, what would you ask us to do?
The easy one or the hard one?
Both.
Okay. Easy one is I'd like a hide translations button
Okay.
in the author thing, right? So I have ready, and then I have a bunch of translations of ready, and then I have to find the other half of coding. And I don't plan to just write these 2 books. I plan to write a bunch of books, and fishing. I might buy the same package for all the other ones,
I
and
see.
so fishing for the primary source is not easy. So that's the easy one.
Okay.
There's just a button to say
So you would
it,
you would what so on your so what we're talking about is on Max's author profile page. on Leanpub where it shows all the books. This book was way under, probably when it was unpublished or something like that, it was way under the bundles and the translations.
It
Um,
still is. It's published, and the translations are all listed as just published books, right? So it's ready, and then it's translation of ready, 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 translation, and so on and so forth. And then finally, the other half of coding, which is not a problem because I always am going to the top or bottom. But if I have 4 books and they all have translations, then I've got to like fish.
yeah, I know what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah. So that's the easy one. Now the hard one.
Okay.
Okay. So as I was writing this book, I had a convention of putting a little blurb at the beginning of each chapter.
Right.
And then I had to take a break. I had to go do some stuff. And then I came back and I'd forgotten that convention. And so here is the feature, like my dream feature. I would love the ability to write tests. I would like the ability, or maybe lint rules would be a better concept. So I'd like to be able to, define a query that says, is there always an element of type blurb as the first thing after the beginning of a chapter, right? And those sorts of things. I would love the ability to start writing what I think of as tests that I can then apply to all chapters. So I make a change, because it's all automated for me, right? I make a change in GitHub and it goes and tells your system, and your system goes and builds the book. It'd be great if that same system just said, hey, bonehead, you forgot to put a blurb here, which is one of your rules, is you're supposed to have a blurb at the beginning of every chapter.
Yeah, that's a very interesting idea, because often authors do have, particularly for kind of nonfiction books and stuff like that, there's kind of repetitive, there's a repeated structure
Right.
for every chapter.
Yeah.
And often, so for example, yeah, like I mean, another example of how that might work is, we have a concept of an aside. So if you've ever read like a textbook in high school or whatever, you'll
Mhm.
normal, and then
Yeah.
something kind of, on the same topic, but not maybe central to what's being discussed, won't be on the test or something like that. But you can imagine how, as an author, you might be like, want to know, I didn't write an aside for chapter 9 or
Right.
something like that. Uh,
Exactly.
uh, and then that would just be kind of like, it would just feel wrong to have it in most chapters, but not all. Um, okay. That's very interesting. I'll write a story for it and add it to our discussion queue. It wouldn't be something that we do relatively soon, but that's the kind of like it's kind of funny. I can imagine what the team's going to go. They're going to be like, "Oh man, I wish we could work on that." Um, but we'll probably have other priorities. But that's a really good suggestion, and I'll make a story about that right away.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
I sorry, I forgot that was for the podcast. And
No, that's fine. That's fine. No, actually, one of the reasons we do these, we love to talk. I mean, I love talking to authors all the time, is to get feedback like that, and so that's really great. So, yeah, again, just to finish again, thanks very much, Max, for taking the time to do this video. The book is The Other Half of Coding, and there's more to come. And if you buy it now, you'll get all the updates for free, obviously, like with all Leanpub books. So, thanks very much, Max, for doing this video.
thank you, Len.